American woodcock and killdeer have a very similar histogram as well. Okay? So we can seem pretty smart if we start to pay attention to when things start to show up around us. And one of the ways that we can do that is we can crowdsource all of you to put your observations online, and then those observations become this data that we can use and check out and be like, is it time yet for the eastern phoebe to show up? Well, let me go online and look and see. Hey, look at that. This is my high-tech way of gathering data on my backyard. So this was taken mid-May. So the last date here, this is my backyard big year list. The other reason why I started slow birding is because I have 3 kids. They're 5, 6, and 7. And so I don't get to go out much. Like today I'm like, woo! I get a break, yes. And then I'm going to run back and go pick everybody up and go to the art show and go to soccer practice or whatever else we have to do. And so for me, I was like, well, I can't get out and do as much as I used to do anymore when it comes to birding, but what's in my backyard? And I had this friend who's a former colleague from National Audubon Society. His name's Rob Fergus. And he started this recommended bird daily allowance, the RBDA. And then he went from the RBDA, and he recommends 11 to 12 birds. You should be able to see 11 to 12 different birds every day. And if you don't have that yet, you should go out and get that before the end of the day so that you stay healthy. And then he started this backyard big year list. Well, we can't travel all over North America and spend thousands of dollars trying to see 768 species of birds, but we can build a list for our backyard. And I'll tell you, the first year I did this, it was 3 years ago, I was shocked at what was coming through my yard. Birds that breed at high elevation, little tiny black-polled warblers, birds that are breeding in spruce bogs way to the north, bay-breasted warbler, Canada warbler, Wilson's warbler, eastern wood pewee that was calling yesterday. He's not going to stick around, but he stopped in my backyard for a snack and to sing a little bit. So what we do is we have a giant Post-it note on the wall, and we just start writing them down. So here's January 1st, January 2nd, and so on and so forth. I try to color code it so that we can all see what we got. The rule is you have to be standing in the yard, and you can hear it or see it. So flybys count, if it's just flying over, right? All of that. So we have some pretty good stuff. Nothing super new this year. The first 2 years, it was like really cool to start to compare years. This year was the first year I put it all in an Excel file spreadsheet and started getting numbers like this. So 50 is the average number of species we see each year. So over the 3 years that we've done it so far, we can be guaranteed around 50 species. We're already past that this year because we're at 60. Whew. That is the number of birds that we've seen, number of species that we've seen or heard in our backyard. It's a small half-acre lot in St. Albans. What's great is we have just a little bit of a forest and a little bit of a brook that runs down next to it, like 80 different species of birds. And there's our number 60 for this year. So this is what I mean by slow birding and just birding where you're at, because there can be so many different things that will show up if you just slow down and learn to look and listen. Yes, in the back.
How many bird feeders do you have attracting all of these birds?
Yeah, so here's the crazy thing, is most of the, so I would say we can stop right about here at 14 species. That would be at the bird feeders. So in the winter, I have a thistle feeder, a suet feeder, and a black oil sunflower. Right now, I have black oil sunflower and hummingbird feeder. But there are warblers and things in here that don't ever come to the feeder. Or like the merlin, like crazy raptors in our, there's a merlin and a Cooper's hawk who are just terrorizing all the birds in our neighborhood. It's great. But chestnut-sided warbler, blue-headed vireo, turkey vulture. What else has been cool this year? Pine siskin, golden crowned kinglets. So they're not necessarily birds that are coming to the feeder, but I have a diversity of tree species in my yard. So I have conifers and I have deciduous trees. It's not totally planted for birds. And it's neighborhoods, one next to another, yep, or yards.
What about the advice that they give to bring the feeders in as if they go first because of theirs?
Right, so I don't do that because I'm in the city. And yes, and if you are in a spot where you have bear as a possibility, I would definitely bring them in. Some people who want to keep enjoying birds at their feeders will build these really Fort Knox kind of feeder situations with big steel pipes, and then they will bring the feeders in during the night so that they're discouraging the bears that are coming out at dusk and dawn into our yards and feeding. But definitely, if you have bears anywhere in your neighborhood, bring them inside. I'm in the city, so we haven't had a lot of bear sightings. No, oddly enough. Nope, and I've got a dog. Our yard is fenced in, so our kids don't fall in the brook. So, so maybe that's part of it too. All right. So taking a deeper look, really learning how to look at birds. One of the things that no one told me to try to do was really look at the bird from head to tail, and really knowing a bird and getting to know them. So once you discover this little guy and where that little guy is on your property, anybody know this one? Oh, it's a wren, winter wren. Oh, so tiny, like tinier than a chickadee, okay? Super cute. You want to go and put yourself there, put yourself in that bird's space and sit calmly and wait and watch. But this guy's got so much going on to tell you what kind of bird it is, from its ping pong ball sized body to the fact that, holy cow, dude, how do you hold your tail up like that? Right? To look at how short these wings are. They don't extend much beyond the body at all. And that beak, that is amazing. You know that that bird is picking at little teeny tiny bugs and deep little cracks and crevices, right? Super. And a crazy song that's like tumbling water over a mouthful of marbles. They are great. So when we start to take a deeper look, we can really get to know the bird, and we can use some different techniques that actually are being explored now in some of the newest field guides and birding books that are coming out. And one of the ones that I'm enjoying a great deal right now is New Peterson's one that's called Birding by Impression. And it really kind of takes you backwards into looking at size, shape, structure, and behavior. Those are the main things that they really try to get you to slow down and look at. And it's a really different way of thinking about birds. All right, you ready for another job? Here you go. Quiz part number 2. Turn to your neighbor and describe an American robin, or a Canadian robin, as the case may be, to the person sitting next to you. I want you to pretend like this person has never, ever seen a robin before. They've never seen a robin before. What are you going to say to them so that they get an idea of what this bird is? Robins, yeah. But what do they really look like? Right? So some good things that I started to hear were people describing how they moved, right? Or the place that you might find them. Okay? I heard descriptions of body shape. I heard plump over here. I like that. Okay? But what's really hard when you're starting to learn birds is trying to have the language and the things to be able to help you put birds in place so that when you're describing it to someone who really wants to help you, maybe has a little bit more knowledge than you, you have these good little hooks that will help clinch that ID. So let's look at the robin.
That's a young one. That's a baby.
Oh, right? The red robin comes bob, bob, bob. It's not really red. It's like brick, rusty, right? So one of the things that we can start to do when we're looking at a bird is to think about how can I map that bird's body out in my mind so I grab as much information as possible before that bird flies away. And let me tell you, when you get to trying to learn sparrows and warblers and even sandpipers, right, they move so fast, you're like, ah. Robins are going to stay still, for the most part. Hop across the lawn and then stop, right? You can keep up with them, and they're big enough so that you can see them. So what you want to do is start from the tip of the beak and work your way down the bird's body and grab as much information as you can. One of the few birds, you know, when you're a kid, you draw every bird has a yellow or orange beak. That's really not the case at all. Me and my kids have been working on grackle and starling. Who's got the yellow bill? Now you got to go home and look, don't you? I'm not going to tell you. Because there's homework here, too. One of them's got a yellow bill and a black eye, and the other one's got a yellow eye and a black bill. Ah, okay. So we can also look for information at the head. We can look for eye rings. We can look for eye stripes. We can look for colors in the throat, and down the chest and breast of the bird. Look at this, stops right here, right underneath the tail. With the wren, we looked at how far the wings went out past the body, or how long the tail was, or how the tail was held. Okay? So these are all these different pieces that we can start to put together when we're looking at a bird. Stay with the bird as long as you can, get as much information as you can, and then open the book. When it flies away, you are allowed to open the book. You don't open the book until the bird flies away, because believe me, you don't have enough information yet. Okay? So one of the things that people struggle with size is how big is it? So we pick birds that we can compare it to, and you've probably already heard me do this. The wren was smaller than a chickadee. So we have birds that we know that are familiar sizes that we can use. So we could use chickadee, we could use robin, we can use crow. What would be maybe the next one up? What would you use? Turkey, raven, goose. I like goose because it adds that waterfowl piece in there. Okay? So something that's bigger than a crow, so that you get all those spots and the spaces in between. Oh my gosh, what is this one? Oh, there, sorry. I was like, oh, I don't know what that means. So the other thing that we can look at is silhouette, like their posture, how they sit, okay? How they sit, how they hold themselves. This morning I was talking to folks about the eastern peewee that sits upright really nice on a branch and the tail bobs a little bit, right? And then a redstart flew in, and the redstart was much more horizontal in comparison to the branch. So how does the bird hold its body? You looking at, how are you doing looking at that? Is your brain like, oop, I know that one, and oop, I know this one, and oop. So one of the cool things that starts to happen as you spend more time and you familiarize yourself with birds is your right brain starts to remember, and your right brain is actually in charge of facial recognition. That's one of the reasons why sometimes when I go places, I'm like, oh, I recognize you. Why don't I remember who you are? But my right brain is saying, you've met this person before because I've mapped their features for you. So one time I was driving when I was kidless. I was like, woo, all the kids are dropped off for the day. I was probably going birding. And I was driving really fast down a back road, and I had the radio blared, and the windows were down because it was early spring, so things just starting to pop out. I was like, this is great. And I'm driving, and I'm singing, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a bird on the wire, and I'm like, ah! Northern Shrike! Awesome! Butcher bird. Turn the car around, go back, and that's what it was. There's no way I could have identified it by like the plumage or really seen the beak, but it was just the way the bird was sitting on the wire. It didn't look like a mourning dove, didn't look like a kestrel, it didn't look like a grackle, and my brain said, stop, because that's a good bird. You want to go back and get that one.
Is it on there?
It's not. Nope. So it's somewhere, kind of in shorter beak. And I've had this happen to me twice now with shrikes. Like, I don't ever find them in the habitats that I want to find them in when I want to find them. I find them when I'm driving, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a shape that doesn't look like all the other birds I normally see on a wire. Just kind of happens. So they're kind of blue jay-like. They have a more blocky head, and they have a hooked beak, and it's just something about the way they sit, right? My left brain can't give you the description because it doesn't make sense to me. It's just that feeling, right? So you're going to have that with certain birds, like you know this one. This little tiny guy. Who's that? Yeah, wren. That tail sticking up. Boom. There's a little wren. Or how about this? Owl. How about that one? Gull. Heron. Super. These are all sets of birds now, right? So if we saw this, this could be an egret. If it was a little smaller and it looked like this, it might be a green heron. Okay? So you can start to train your brain. How am I going to group these birds based on what they kind of look like in their silhouettes? You can find this online. It's from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website. It's just a great thing. You can print it out and start being like, ooh, which one is which? Who's who on there? All right, so here's another slow birding story. But stop birding, right? This is like wherever, whenever. And this is like a big growth thing for me this year. So my kids get on the bus at 2 different times. They get on at, it's like 7 o'clock. I got to be out there at 7. And then the next one gets on at 7:30. And then we got to go drop a preschooler off at preschool. I can't wait next year when they're all getting on somewhere at the same time, sort of at the same time. But it means I get to walk out to the bus stop about a block and back. And so through the winter, we started birding. And we were keeping track of what we were seeing. And we would walk together, and we were getting to know all the winter birds. And then as the spring birds came back, we were hearing them and watching them and seeing them. So some of the things that came out of this for my kids were they got to know the usual suspects. They got to know blue jay, and then the starling, and the grackle, and the chickadee, and the titmouse that's in the neighborhood, and the cardinals. And then when song sparrows came back, those guys came into play. My oldest daughter, Alexis, now, she's like, Mom, how many starling nests are we up to? She's now counting where she's seeing starlings going into all the holes in our neighbors' houses and building nests. She's like, we're at 6. We got 6. She's like, I'm looking for that next one, 7. My middle one is whistling the songs that he's hearing. So he's whistling, hey, sweetie, like the chickadee. And me, I'm birding without binoculars. So I'm really focused on shape and in relation to one another. I am so good at grackles and starlings now without any color, right? When they're backlit, I got it down now because I know the length of the tail, and I know how they hold themselves, and I know how they walk on the ground or don't walk on the ground. I know what they look like in flight because I forced myself to kind of change up how I was birding, and I took advantage of those walks to the bus stop. So one day at the bus stop, coming back after dropping Colby off, and there's a racket, and the crows are coming into this willow tree right across the street from my house. And they're all coming into this willow tree, and all of a sudden, from way over here, these 2 birds go whoosh, and hit this top of the tree. They go right in there. And they're fast, super fast. And the crows are not happy. And they're sitting on the tree, on the willow tree, going, ah, 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 ah! And they're bouncing on the branches, and they're just going, ah, ah, ah! And 2 of them would fly out, and they would go right to the top of that conifer, and they would dive in. And the other ones are still, and there's more crows coming, and more crows coming. Anybody got an idea of what was happening? Good. Predator, some kind of predator, bird of prey. If I say super fast, who's super fast in the bird world? Falcons, good. We don't have any peregrines in St. Albans, bummer. Kestrel or merlin, we have nesting merlins. So the merlins came blown out of the neighborhood way over here, came in. This is a tree they keep trying to nest in every year. But in my backyard, there's a huge wooded area, and the crows nest there. And they were like, no, you are not coming in our neighborhood. And so they harassed these merlins off the site and then stayed there for over an hour. And the group disbanded and dispersed. But there were still 2 there later after I was working for a while going, ah, 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 just making sure those merlins weren't coming back. Pretty cool. So that deeper listening part is the right? That's mad, that's angry, that's alarm. So when we start to break down the voices that we're hearing from birds, we can listen a little bit deeper and pay attention to what's going on so that when the merlins blow through the neighborhood and there's alarm sounds going off left and right, you know to look up. Where's that merlin? We have a Cooper's hawk too, so I'm like, Cooper's hawk or merlin? Where is he? He's somewhere in here right now. So let's just listen. Everybody got a place for that? Can that soundscape put you in a place? Yeah? Okay. The woods, swampy. How about this one? You just got that feeling too, right? When you hear that, there's certain birds that when you hear them, there's like this little rush. Ooh. Thrushes do that for me. This is common loon. A loon. All right, one more. So, did you get 3 different places out of that? Did you know all the birds? No, I don't even know all the birds in that. I'm like, okay, well, that's one I probably got to brush up on. So, forest, lake or ocean side with forest nearby, because there were some forest species in there. And then the third one was like a meadow or grassland, right? Yeah. So when we start to listen to the soundscape too, right? Like, what's the soundscape for this place? And you kind of open up and slow down. You don't even need to know the birds, but you know you're in a different place because of the sounds that are around you. All right. Here we go. Here's another one. What's your neighborhood soundtrack right now? So you can write it down, or you could turn to somebody next to you. You could be like, I hear this bird that goes da 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 da. And I just made that up. That's not a real bird. So again, you don't have to know what it is. You're like, oh, I recognize that different sound. That is a different sound. How many different sounds do you think you have, or maybe even that you recognize? See, there is a quiz. White-throated sparrow, yep. So mimicking is a great way to learn songs, is by trying to make the same song sounds yourself. If it's like a nice whistling song, like the white-throated sparrow, you have nice clear notes in there. So get to know your soundscape. Here's a challenge. Tomorrow morning when you get up, go outside with a cup of tea, cup of coffee, whatever you start your day with, and just stop and listen and be like, how many different bird sounds am I hearing? You could throw chipmunk in there too, and if you got some frogs calling, maybe you can do that too. Or the beaver slaps his tail and you're like, okay, good. But how many different sounds am I hearing? And some of the usual suspects like chickadee, you can start to tune them out and then listen deeper. Who's new this morning? If you start doing that every morning, you're going to start to hear those birds that are moving and passing through. That's what happened to me last night with the wood pewee, and my husband was mowing the lawn with he just brought home one of those like push lawn mowers that have like the spinner blades on them. So I can actually get his attention now when he's mowing the lawn and tell him to be quiet when I start to hear a new bird. I was like, Jeremy, stop! So he stopped. And we heard the wood pewee in the backyard. And I knew that was new. It wasn't on my list yet because it hadn't moved through. So you can do that same thing. Pewee! Ah, dee dee. So birds have voices that we can kind of fit them into. And I'm going to show you another book. This is one of the books that kind of got me going on this whole slow birding thing ages ago. It doesn't have a great cover to see, but it's about this size. It's called What the Robin Knows. It's by John Young. He studied with Tom Brown, who's like a famous tracker, and kind of comes from this world of like learning from indigenous peoples and how can birds and mammals and things connect us with landscape and tell us more about what's going on around us. So John Young and this other guy, Dan Gardocki, who I had the pleasure of working with this spring, kind of broke song down into 5 voices. These beautiful songs that we hear, the poor Sam peevity, 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 by the white-throated sparrow, right? Anything that's longer and has a little bit of a melody to it is a song. So we have territorial songs where the birds are trying to set up their territory and say, this is my space. They have a song that is mating. It may be the same. It may be something a little bit different. Then they have shorter sounds or shorter voices that they use. Chickadees do this little right? Little tiny sip notes or chip notes. Those are contact notes so that when they're moving together and they're feeding together, they stay in touch with one another. Then you get the food begging call. Alexis knows where the starling nests are right now because she listens to the that's coming out of the holes in the side of the neighbors' houses. She's like, there's got to be a nest there, Mom, because I can hear the babies. And I was like, right, so that's begging. And then the 5th voice is, alarm, right? Loud, sharp, is going to tell you what's going on. So when the bird switches to something that's more intense, you really want to pay attention. I was in the backyard with all 3 of my kids. It was like after school one day. They were bouncing around in the trampoline. All that kid noise. Don't do that. Quit hitting me. And I'm doing something in the backyard. And normally the house wren is like, you know, doing his little chatty thing. And all of a sudden the house wren switches into alarm. I'm like, ooh, alarm. Look up, and along the edge of the woods in my neighbor's yard is a fox moving right along the edge. So alarm calls tell you to take notice and to look. So if you think about it, if you were in Africa or someplace where there were lions and things big enough to eat you, being able to pay attention to bird alarm calls would be really, really important. So that's where some of this work comes from, and it's really quite fascinating. And I love it. All right. I'm paying attention to the time. And I'm like, I have a bunch more slides, so we're going to speed up here a little bit, just a little bit. And we'll listen to Robin. Right, first thing in the morning. This is the beautiful fluty territory. I'm waking up, okay? But at dawn, at really true dawn, it's faster. Because he wants to let you know I'm awake. No one's going to mess with my territory right now, so it's a little bit faster. Robins also have 2 grades of alarm. So that's low grade, right? That's still a little bit shorter and sharper, but it's not so intense as this one. And that's just a little bit more intense, so that's a high grade alarm. Robins are a great bird to get to know. So we don't spend that time really looking and listening, and they have the foundation for everything that we need. So I'm going to skip this, and I'm going to give you these things. So one of the things that I've been working with folks on the bird walks with, we don't have language. We're like, oh, peep and chirp and stuff like that. We don't have really good words to describe song quality. But once you get those words, you're like, ooh, then what you're describing becomes a little bit more richer. So when we listen to something, if we can whistle it, that's a clear note. Who can trill their tongue? Go ahead, don't be afraid. Mimicing's good. Not everybody can. All right, good. So So if it's a trill, we have trillers. We have sets of birds that have a trill. Maybe it has a nice clear note and then it goes into a trill. Okay? Maybe it has a buzzy or burry quality to it. Does it sound insect-like? Does it sound like it has a sore throat? Okay? So does it have a burry quality to it? So those are some of the words that we can use. Does it go up on the end? Eastern Phoebe asks its name. It says Phoebe. And the note pulls up on the end, and then it answers it. And when you answer something, your voice goes down. Phoebe. 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 You have a Phoebe in your yard, go home and listen, and you'll hear that up and the down. So these are some of the things that kind of can help us listen a little bit deeper and be able to put words to kind of what we're hearing. This is the other piece that I love now. Because I'm starting to slow down, and I'm not worrying about who it is, I get to see all this other stuff that I wasn't paying attention to before when I was like, oh, yep, that's a such and such, and I'm good to go, right? So this bird, a friend of mine just sent me this. She attended one of my slow birding test sessions, and she was like, Bridget, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't care. I got the camera out, and I just started shooting photos. So this bird showed up in the apple tree and is feeding here. So this set of three, up and down. So it's poking in the blossoms. She actually started to notice that it was pulling off the little stamens on the inside and eating those. She slowed down that much that she got to watch that bird pluck teeny tiny little stamens out of the middle of the flower. And then she watched him do this. What's that all about? A little preening, right? I'm going to get myself all cleaned up. Over this shoulder, over that shoulder, and just shake it all out. I'm all fluffy now. Look at how fluffy that bird looks. Same bird, it's just a different behavior. It's really kind of cool. So these are some of the things that are fun to start to look for in terms of behaviors, right? And this time of year is so rich. And I think what we forget as like the birders of us, forget that it's not all about migration. There's so much else to look at, right? So especially as we lead up to this time of year, we have things like mating. These are two cardinals that are feeding each other. And I got really excited when I saw this last year in my yard when I was sitting on my sit spot. And I was like, ooh, that's a behavior. I'm going to go look that up. So this is another really great series of books. These are the Stoke Nature Guides to Bird Behavior. There's 3 of them. And when I looked it up, I found that when you see a pair feeding each other like this, it means they're going to nest nearby. Sometimes within 5 feet of where you saw this pair bonding happen. I was like, really? Oh. Wouldn't you know it, in the apple bush, right in my neighbor's yard, that's where that pair ended up. Not, well, maybe like 10 feet away. But I knew to look, and it was that behavior that cued me in. Nesting behavior, we've been watching catbirds try to pull up grasses, dead grasses out of our lawn lately. Dinner time is like a great show because there's just windows that look out over the backyard, and we often get interrupted by whatever's going on with the birds. Catbirds with mouthfuls of nesting material, or, you know, in a couple weeks you might find a bird like this with just gobs of insects dripping from its beak, right? You're like, really? You're going to eat all those? No. It's all about the babies. Then you can watch that bird and see if you can figure out where the nest is. Ooh, cool. Posture, oh, this one, distraction. Here's a killdeer, like flopping around, pretending like it's hurt. Nest is nearby. It doesn't want you anywhere near that. Different flight behaviors that we can look for. We talked about preening. And different postures. This is a little warbler, and his tail is all jacked up like a wren. And look, he's showing his throat. What do you think that's all about? Mating. Maybe there's another Karula warbler, like, facing him, and he's like, face off, go. And whoever wins the female, right? So it's like these weird little things that you see where you're like, that's not normal. That's like not how I normally see them, or how they're nicely posed in the bird guide, right? So I'm going to pay attention a little bit longer. All right, I am not bad. We are getting there. I got 2 more slides for you. So here's 2 things I'm going to suggest. One is slowing down when you're walking, okay? So we're going to be mindful, and it was wonderful this morning on the walk that I did at the Tyler place. This one woman said, it's just so nice to, like, listen, like, to stop and listen. And I was like, right, it brings you back, right, into yourself, into place, right? So it's kind of this mindfulness. It's like a type of meditation where you can let go of listing and allow the birds to just kind of wash over you and not really worry about who they are. Maybe for a moment or two, and then you're like, let the birds present themselves. This is the other thing that I love is, so the bird's there, it presents itself to you, and if you stay with it long enough, you're likely to see something. You're likely to see one of those behaviors. Preening, mating. This morning we had these two really puffed up, it started with one white-breasted nuthatch, and I was like, God, that guy's holding really still. What is wrong with it? Not moving at all, right? Nuthatches don't stay still. They're like foraging, bloop, 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 bloop. And he was fluffed up, and I'm like, it's almost 70 degrees. What's wrong with that bird? That's really weird. Just watching him. And then I start to look around the other tree, and I see this other little ball, kind of about the same size. And I'm like, what is that? Oh, it's another puffy nuthatch. And then I was like, bing! What were they? Baby nuthatches! Oh! Yes! All right. So they were fluffy because they had just fledged. They still had some of those downy feathers. I'm making the time. I make time to slow down now when I can on bird walks. Some of the bird walks it's a little bit harder to do than others, but when I'm birding by myself, I'm not worried about getting there to get that bird or getting as many species as I can. I'm going to slow down and make time so I can do that. I can stop and watch the nuthatch and figure it out. I'm not just going to be like, okay, nuthatch, why are you so fat? Because you're a baby. So making the time. Relaxing and breathing. How many of you do this? Like when you get stressed out, everything goes in here. You hear that robin sing, you can take a deep breath and relax and let all of that stuff go and just listen to the robin. And I challenge those of you who are birders to leave the binoculars behind and see what you can see without looking at detail and plumage and all of that. What can I learn about behavior and structure and shape without seeing the bird through my binoculars? All right, and the other one I'm gonna recommend to you is picking a sit spot. So we're back in my backyard again. And this is from the book, What the Robin Knows as well. That's my sit spot right there, outside my back door. You know, you see these pictures online of people sitting in the woods, and it's like giant, huge, old-growth forest, and the sunlight's coming through the trees, and they're like, this is my sit spot. It's a magical place. You don't have to go find that magical place deep in the woods. It can be right outside your back door with kids jumping in the trampoline. It will happen. So what I try to do is I try to spend 10 to 20 minutes every morning. I get everybody off to school, and I go sit out there with a little notebook, and I just listen, and I look, and I watch, and I observe. And it's really amazing what has been presented to me from the birds by doing that. So out here is forest. It's all the backyards of all my other neighbors who have these long rectangular yards. And so it's just right, and things come through for some reason. Take notes, because you're going to want to know who was here when last year. So get that giant Post-it note to start your backyard bird list. So there you have it. Slow down, and I'm sure the next time I see you, you will have some fabulous stories to share with me, just like I shared with you today. It's totally possible. We just take a little breather and slow down and look. Thank you all so much for coming inside.
We have time for a few questions and comments, and I hope, Bridget, you can stay around.
I can stick around for a little bit.
Some refreshments afterwards, but one or two questions we can go with now.
Yeah.
Bridget.
I refer to your histogram that you have.
Yes.
If I understood it well, it shows variations between months.
Yes.
For each species.
Mm-hmm.
What about between years? Have you noticed strong between year variations?
Yes.
For particular species?
So he's asking on the histograms, you can see the variation across the year. Can you see variations between years? And they have a whole mapping feature that you can do that, graphing feature that you can do that with. So you can make a graph of, like, say, American goldfinch, and you wanted to know how often they were showing up on people's bird lists over a number of years. And you can pick each year that you want for that. eBird data online goes back to 1900 because folks have been putting old data in. Some of you may have notebooks at home that are full of really good, juicy data. And we get that online, and that turns into some of these things that we can pull up and visualize. So one of the other things that I encourage people to write about when they're writing about what they're seeing in their yard is to keep track of weather and snow depth, things like that. So certain birds will stick around in the wintertime when there's not a lot of snow, and if the snow cover becomes too deep, they can't find what they need, so they move on. And goldfinches are just like that. So there's this kind of flux that happens from year to year depending on weather and snow cover and things like that. Yeah?
Is there any particular concern where the species really declining dramatically?
Lots. Yes, there's many species of concern. So in Vermont, I think there are, Audubon Vermont has identified 26 responsibility bird species. And the way Audubon is looking at it is that they're trying to look at where the core breeding habitat is for birds and protect and work in those areas. So instead of birds that are already on the edge, okay, and may not be here as much anymore, we're really looking at where the core habitat is and then trying to protect those birds there to kind of help even out the numbers. But there are many birds in decline for a number of reasons, and most of it is habitat conversion or fragmentation. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I had a feeder, with the red syrup to attract hummingbirds, and they came, and then the wasps came.
Yes.
What do I do?
What do you do? Okay, so the first thing is don't use the hummingbird feed with the dye in it. Just go for a straight sugar water. It's like 4 to 1. Some sites say 2 to 1. I go with what Cornell says, which is like the 4 to 1. So sometimes taking the red dye out can help. The other thing is if you don't change it up a lot, the water evaporates and then it becomes a really highly concentrated like sugar thing. And so you want to dump that out, clean it out, and start over. And sometimes that will help with the wasps too. But sometimes not. Yeah?
A 4-letter word, cats. I have heard that putting coffee grounds on the ground underneath where the feeders are will help keep the cats away. Have you heard of this?
Yes, and it doesn't necessarily work. She's like the 4-letter word. This is the word that Jane Lindholm and I avoid on Vermont Public Radio because it always turns into a giant discussion. But I'm going to put myself out on a limb here. I think the only way that we can help decrease the amount of impact that cats have on bird populations, amphibian populations, small mammal populations, is by keeping them inside or leashed like we do with our dogs. And dogs have similar impact too when we let them run off leash in those wild places that we love to enjoy. So we increase the disturbance into a wild space as our dog goes off of the trail. So I advocate for towns and cities to look at guidelines that will help pet owners make better choices about their animals so that they won't impact songbirds. And that's it. We're not talking about cats anymore. I'm a cat owner. I have a cat. I stay inside. Yep.
I'm wondering, I have a woodpecker. It's either a downy or a hairy woodpecker, but it comes every morning and spends most of the day pecking at the sill around my window, and occasionally at the glass, but it's not flying against the glass. It's simply perched there, pecking at the windowsill and sometimes
Yes.
for hours.
Hours. Hormones. So male birds during this time of year, the amount of hormones that are coursing through their body is completely elevated. And so what he's doing is he's found a spot that resonates really well when he hits it and carries. So that's what it is.
But just to add to that, at one
So
point,
bubble wrap everything. Yes.
mate
The mate
on
showed
the
up.
other side, wait, on the other side of the window.
Yes.
And they communicated with each other for a little while, and then they both flew away. Isn't that weird?
No, it's not. That's beautiful. High five me. Come on, don't leave me hanging. Okay, there we go. So these are the things, right, when we're like, oh, it's a pest, oh, it's a problem, right? Like you slow down and you take that minute to watch and look and see that difference. There's something different there. That's the male, that's the female. Oh, she responded. That's great. That window works.
To go home and get
She's like, come on, let's go. Exactly, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Here we go. Good morning, Bellows Falls, and welcome to the feed. Here we are. And it's May 30th, and we're focusing on our posture. We have our monitor back, so this is a big red letter day for the feed because now we can sit up straight and see ourselves. And you notice how we all are sort of like doing that. So
because apparently when I don't have a monitor, I sit like this.
So anyway, we have Janice Leary today, and she's going to talk about the farmers market. First, Marty's going to go over some local events that are happening today.
Today we have the follow-through forum to the opioid crisis called Bringing Hope Home. So it's this evening. It's at the Rockingham Public Library. It's in the community room, which is on the 3rd floor. It's from 6 to 8. And they're going to be talking about all of the things that have happened since the original forum.
Right, and it's been quite a few things. They went to Atlanta and went to a conference, and there's some new restorative justice things going. The kids from Friends for Change are going to be there. They're going to talk about, part of the program is going to be them doing things. So come on down to the library tonight. It's going to be interesting. Marty and I will be there.
We'll be there, and you know, if you missed the first one, and if you somehow feel the need to get connected and to do something to maybe help build a community, to help address the crisis, then come on down to the library.
Yeah, and side note, Marty is arranging this weekend to do, for the Rotary Conference, she's actually arranged a opioid, well, how can Rotaries help with opioids?
Well, I didn't arrange it.
Yeah,
It was
but
a
you
Rotary
were the,
thing, but
without you, it never would have come to fruition.
I don't think so. But anyway, you are going to be presenting at the Rotary District Conference this weekend with the idea that we can hope to parlay the power of Rotary in the state of Vermont and get other Rotary clubs to do similar things in their communities to really address this crisis, to harness our social.
Well, I don't want to blow our horn, but it's another time where Bellows Falls is sort of leading on this, because I just got an email today from people from Rutland and Burlington talking about they want to do something, and they were wondering how we did it.
We're on the cutting edge. And then we're coming up on, believe it or not, I was just reading this, the 19th annual Roots on the River.
Yes.
Coming up on the weekend of June 8th through 10th up at the, what's the name of the inn now? It's Roadway Inn. I still want to call it the Rockingham Motor Lodge.
Yeah, well.
The Roadway Inn. So get your tickets. Tickets are on sale at the bookstore. They're on sale at www.rootsontheriver.com. So go in. It's going to be a good year this year. The Slambovian Circus of Dreams is back.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun.
Have you ever seen Gandalf Murphy?
What's that?
Have you ever seen Gandalf Murphy and Slambovian Circus of Dreams? No. Just the name alone should lead you to believe it's a show. It's an entertaining show. They're very good.
They're saying the forecasts. I know they're long distance. The forecasts are for good weather.
Really,
so,
that's unusual.
Usually rains. It's usually a good time to count on. If you're collecting rainwater, do it that weekend.
Do it Roots on the River weekend. And then this Friday is the first farmers market.
Yay! And that's why Janice is here.
Yes, exactly. We're super excited about the farmers market. And we have new hours this year. This year we're running 3 o'clock until 7 o'clock in the evenings.
That's good.
Yes.
I mean, because, and I think a lot of people sort of Friday is an earlier day for work. And so 3 o'clock is a nice time to get out and
meander on over to Henny Green Park.
Exactly.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we put out a customer feedback survey over the summer, and one of the questions was about the operating hours, and there was overwhelming feedback that 3 to 7 would be optimal.
Great. Good.
That's good. Yeah, it kind of makes sense when you figure, like, because you're right near the school, number one, so the teachers are getting out and they're kind of driving by. A lot of people are kind of running around doing errands, and I do think Friday afternoon is an earlier afternoon for people, so they can kind of, it gives them a little more time to get everything done.
Yes,
which is cool.
Definitely, we're excited about it.
So who do you have for vendors this year? Do you have some of the same vendors?
We have some of the same vendors, and then we have an interesting group of new vendors as well. So there's going to be quite diverse offerings this year for sure, and I'm really excited about that. As far as who to get your fruits and vegetables from, we have Abenaki Spring Farms from over in New Hampshire. They are our variety produce farmer. They'll have everything from greens to summer squash to your lovely tomatoes and cucumbers. But right now, please remember, everyone mostly has greens and herbs and maybe some radishes because it's just the time of year.
It's been a cool spring, too.
Yes,
Things are starting off slow.
It's very true. So please remember that, folks. Don't forget. Don't expect tomatoes.
Summer squash.
Right.
No tomatoes, watermelon, or
right. Later in the season. Bear with us. Yes, and then we have Live Water Farm from over in Westminster West, and Taylor does lots of cheeses. He also grows greens and has eggs, but this year, woo-hoo-hoo, he is bringing ice cream.
Oh, really?
Farm fresh ice cream that he's made himself. He uses the milk from his grass-fed cows, and we are crazy excited that he's bringing his small batch ice cream with him this year.
Great.
Wonderful
that sounds really
for a
good.
Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
And then Mirasol Farm from over in Langdon, New Hampshire. They've been participating with us for a few years now. They do nutrient-dense farming, and they'll be joining us again this year as a day vendor. So as they're available with lots of yummy produce, they'll come along and join us.
Let me ask a question.
Yes.
What is nutrient-dense farming?
So they really focus in on, one, caring for their soil and making sure that they are replenishing their soil. But nutrient dense means they focus specifically on crops that are nutrient dense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So power greens, greens in general, beets. So they're focusing on the vegetables that give you the most bang for your buck nutritionally.
All
Yeah.
right. I just needed to ask.
I know,
that.
exactly.
One of
It's
those
not a term
terms
that you
you
hear.
throw out, but
Right.
I was like, okay.
Well, which is something that
You talk about a lot.
talk about a lot. And
That's
so
why I sort of picked it up too, because
is that's what people, if you're looking to be healthier, then that's really where you have to start. You have to add nutrient density to your diet. And I should say food choice because I don't like the word diet because people just think of calorie. Well, inherently, when something is nutrient dense, it's often also calorie light. So you get your nutrients and you don't have to worry about calories, and you can usually eat as much as you want sometimes with the nutrient dense because you're not going to overeat more than likely. I mean, you can only eat so many greens before it's like, okay, I've had enough greens, beets. But that's a cool
Niche.
Yeah.
Their garlic is
do they
amazing.
Really?
advertise it that way? Do they talk about that with folks? Do they kind of educate people, or
I
do
really
people
wish
not
they
ask?
would do more. I don't think that they really put it out there as much as they could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because as we talk about why would you go to a farmer's market, there's one of the primo reasons is like you can go to a store, but you're not going to get the same. I mean, there's a whole
quality.
different level of quality, which translates to a different level of everything, of health and flavor and all those things. But if people are thinking, well, I could just go to Shaw's and get iceberg lettuce,
No, it's true.
Not that Shaw's is bad.
It definitely has a function in society for sure. So exactly what you're talking about. I mean, when you think about most of the produce that's in a grocery market, it's been harvested about 2 weeks before you even see it there on the shelf. So it has had 2 weeks to lose all of its nutrients and degrade. And when you go to the farmer's market, it has been picked from that field,
Probably that
especially
day, right?
on a late afternoon Friday market, that day, exactly. And you can't beat that as far as feeding yourself good, healthy foods.
Right.
Yeah.
And the soil too. You're saying that they're really careful with their soil to keep the nutrient in their soil. A lot of times, the produce that you're getting that was shipped 2 weeks ago is in soil that was fertilized, isn't necessarily that nutrient dense. They just kind of, it's agribusiness. They're just kind of growing it to mass produce. And yes, if you have broccoli that's locally produced versus broccoli, that's where I see the most taste difference in something like that. Carrots too. Carrots, if you have a carrot that was grown locally versus a carrot that you get in a giant container, it's just a whole taste difference. And I think when people say they don't really like vegetables, it's because they haven't really tasted like really tasted local,
Fresh
fresh
vegetables,
vegetables.
right.
No,
Yeah.
it's true. My daughter's favorite thing to do in the summertime is just hop over into the garden and pull out
Start-
a carrot and
Yeah.
go to the faucet and wash it, and then start nibbling away. I mean, you're right there. You can't beat the amazing flavor that you get from
Yeah.
vegetables that are so fresh. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I didn't mean to interrupt because you do
Oh,
have
it's
a lot
great
of vendors.
conversation,
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
It's an important
yeah.
conversation. Grafton Grown Lavender. They're new with us this year. They're out of Grafton. And she'll join us once her lavender crop is in.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't only just provide lavender, she also makes candles and other products from the lavender
Right.
that she grows as well. A homesteaders cooperative. They
Who's
are
in that group? I've heard of them.
Yeah, a group of local homesteaders. My family is a participant as well. And we basically either have produce or plant starts, but we also do lots with the produce that we grow. So there's pickles and relishes and jams and all sorts of loveliness. Some of you local folks will know Patrick Mateau. He sells his hot sauces with us. And then there's another young woman, Lauren, who lives here in the Gageville area. She's joining us this year with lots of different body care products that she's made
interesting.
herself.
Nice. Yeah.
Yes.
That's great.
And then One Up Mushrooms. We love One Up
I was going to
Mushrooms.
ask you. I saw that gentleman there last year. That's like kind of a new thing for the farmers market, isn't it? To have an
Yes.
actual mushroom vendor, because they're kind of like the big thing now. Talk about nutrient density.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's the one vegetable. It's not a vegetable, but it's the one vegetable that people sort of overlook and don't incorporate in their diet, and it is so incredibly important because it provides this whole other area of nutrient that you can't get because it's a fungus. It's something
Right,
different.
And they're delicious.
Yes.
And they
They
give
were
you-
so cool. I mean, finding
His
that
oyster
last year
mushrooms
was
are
just
amazing.
amazing. Yeah.
And I talked with him just yesterday morning, and he's got stuff growing, and he's hoping it's going to bloom large enough to have
Oh,
it there
nice.
this Friday.
Holy cow, nice.
Yeah. Roy and Connor are really doing great things. They live over in Westminster West, and last year was their first year. So it was their first year going to any of the local markets. And we're really glad that they decided to join us here in Bellows Falls.
Yeah, they must have done well if they're back, right?
Yeah,
That's good.
This
That's
is their
great.
focus.
Yeah.
Is growing mushrooms. It's Connor's passion. So yeah. Vermont elderberry. Gino grows many elderberry bushes and makes his own tonic from that to help you stay healthy. And he'll be joining us later in the season once elderberries are in season. Grandview Gourmet will be with us again this year. Dylan lives up over on Hartley Hill, and he makes delicious breads. And he's really branching out this year and starting to do some other food products as well. So I'm even just excited to see what he'll offer
what's he
this
gonna
year.
do? Yeah,
At our fundraiser 2 weeks ago, he had this neat new product that he's making. I'm probably not going to pronounce it correctly. Slee, I think is SLIE.
Oh, is that the?
It was like a spread.
Okay, maybe that's not. There was something that you could put on your burger. It almost looked like cheese, but it wasn't cheese. Was that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's something new that he's experimenting with, and it was quite tasty. Oh, Flying Crow Coffee Roasters out of Springfield. They'll be joining us. And then not this week because her daughter is having a wedding down south, but for the rest of the season, Michelle from over at Heritage Bakery will in Chester.
Yeah.
She'll be joining us with food, with hot, yummy
Yummy
food.
pastries and baked goods. And
I think more than just baked goods.
Oh,
like,
really?
Yeah, like dinner. Let's get some
nice.
food
Yeah,
at the market. That's what Michelle's going to be bringing. She'll bring some baked goods as well, but that's going to be
But
her
really,
focus.
it's going to be more focused
Yeah, think
on
about that.
something
beautiful,
you can eat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That beautiful like deli case that she has in her restaurant, filled with all the take-home food. So she's going to be doing that
Nice.
sort of thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Sunshine Cottage is over on Hartley Hill as well in Westminster, and they're going to be bringing teas, blended teas. And then, of course, we'll have Daddy's Girl soaps with us again. Wonderful soaps, last forever. And then for artistes, we have Joanna Alex Watercolor joining us again this year. And then Jack Peters from Saxton's River Studio.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
His
Good,
photography,
good.
yeah.
Not just the photography, also his jewelry, too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Really well-rounded selection group of things. That's
I
going to be really
think
nice.
so. I
Yeah.
think it will be great to, walk through the park and see what you can pick up on a Friday afternoon.
And how many years, we were talking about this in my class this morning, is this your third year at Hetty Green?
Second.
Second, okay. I thought it was
Oh, no,
third.
third. Yes, you are right.
Yeah.
My second year.
Okay, I thought it was the
It's
third
third,
year.
yes.
So it's kind of, it seems like it's kind of finally establishing itself
It's
and
growing
growing.
some roots.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Pardon
yeah.
the pun.
Yeah.
But, because I know for
They're
a
not
while
on the
it
river,
was-
but they are in Bellows Falls.
it's kind of in flux because it started at the Waypoint Center and then they tried it on Canal Street for a year and then it kind of, I don't think people really knew exactly where it was going to be. So I think now it's established.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And that
It's
consistency
growing and
adds
the
a lot
consistency.
too. That
And
they
it's
know
very
they're going to be,
visible.
you're going to be there, and there's going to be a variety. That makes a huge difference. Yeah.
I hope so. And we'll have music again every week. And Friends for Change are going to join us again and set up activities for children. We'll continue our scavenger hunt this year, which is hugely popular with children, where if they come out to the market and answer 3 scavenger hunt questions, they get a market buck to spend at the market. So we'll definitely continue that program. It's been wildly popular with the children. And we just love having Friends for Change come on over and
Yeah, it sort of helps. It
facilitate
adds
activity.
a nice, another nice family, sort of family-oriented, family feel to, community feel to it. Where it's it's really nice.
Oh, it's a lovely place to hang out for a while with children. They quite enjoy the experience. They get some outdoor fun. Hetty Green Park has that whole area underneath the trees, so even if it's super hot, the children are happy with the hula hoops or tossing a ball or whatever. The music's always great. It really is a wonderful family experience for sure.
Yeah. And it's starting this week.
Starting this week.
Yeah.
And you also, I think it's important to point out, you take EBT cards, correct?
That's absolutely true. Not only do we take EBT cards, but if you withdraw $10 from your card, we give you an additional $10 in crop cash.
Wow, that's
Yes.
good. That's really good.
It's an amazing program that I wish everyone would take advantage of, please. You spend 10 of your own dollars, we give you 10 additional dollars to spend at the market. And you don't have to take out that full 10. So say somebody comes and takes out $5, I will give them, it's up to $10.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
take out whatever,
Like fun-
you
if
could
do-
take out
it's
20,
basically
but I
matching.
can only match up
Yeah.
to 10.
That's really
Yeah.
a good deal.
It's fantastic
Yeah.
and incredibly helpful to families and seniors as well. All you have to do is let me know that you use EBT and I will help you out.
Great.
That's great, because that's a huge bonus, again, with the idea of nutrient density and health and just, can you speak a little bit to how important it is that people support local farmers, to keep local farmers, to have that fresh, how it kind of all goes around and it stays local?
Sure. So when you spend your money at the farmer's market, you are making sure that that farmer has the money that they need to buy those seeds, to the products that they need to help them fertilize the soil, and even the gas that they need to get to the market.
Right.
And not only are you helping to support that farmer and that farmer's family, but you're also helping to support their employees as well. And the thing about spending money locally is then that money stays locally. So the farmer tends to spend their money locally as well. Their employees spend their money locally as well. So you're keeping that money right here in this beautiful Bellows Falls area.
Right.
which then in turn helps support the community.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're not just running to the nearest box store to spend their money. They're supporting other local businesses as well,
Right.
because they understand the value of supporting local. So it's this kind of hand in hand, let's all work together to help our own community sort of a situation. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Yeah. I think people sometimes they just miss the mark. Like, yeah, you can maybe drive to Walmart and you can go into their organic section and you can get something organic there, but you're not supporting the people you live and do business with.
Absolutely.
Especially if you have a local business and you want people to support your local business, then it all goes around in a circle, and you're not really saving anything because you're not doing anything for your community. You know, you're supporting.
It's one of the drums we beat here on.
Yeah, we beat it here all
on
the time.
feed.
Yeah, we do.
3 weeks ago, we were like, you have to, if you want to have a good community, you have to put something into the community.
Yeah,
if you
we
want to
have-
have a great farmer's market, you have to support the farmer's market.
That exists.
I mean,
at
it's just so,
then, right.
it sounds
You
redundant.
can't wait for the
but you can't-
farmer's market that
yeah.
you want. You have to go out
Yeah,
and support
and
the farmer's
just
market
what you're
that's
talking
there.
about today just demonstrates that. Because I remember last year was, you were here last year, but the year before, it's really growing and it's really becoming a really vibrant farmers market. But last year it was like, well, I hope we can do this, and I think we're going to do that. But this year you have a list. There's people coming.
Yeah.
There's products people know, and the food is great. And you know, it's like that's what happens when you support the farmers market, and you have someone like you who's there to lead people and say, this is what we can do. And this is because I remember you came from Cape Cod, right?
Yes.
Where I don't want to say where it was hard to be. It was hard to be a farmer and hard to be in the same idea of you're growing and you're supporting local, because it's just a different culture. It's a more tourist-driven culture or something. But
It is. And what I just want to say, you know, the thing about the farmers market is that, yes, we want to support local, but I love what you were saying about building community. That is hugely important to us at the farmers market. We want it to be a community meeting place. We want it to be open and welcoming to everyone. And the only way that we're going to affect change in our community is to become a part of it and to go out and say hello to your neighbor, and just be present. And I want the farmers market to be that a community meeting place where people can go
Right.
and do that and have wonderful conversation and listen to some great music and get some fabulously healthy food at the same time.
right, because it's more than just a place to go buy some veggies. It's a community. It's in itself, it's a community, and then it's bringing this community together on Fridays, and you know, people are seeing it. It's really pretty interesting. It's sort of what we talk about with these different things, that the opposite of addiction is connection, and this is another way that we can connect, and we need to connect.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up this even. We last year started to focus on inviting local community groups to come and table. Nonprofits can table for free. As long as you're not selling something. If you're selling something, then we have to talk
obviously,
a little bit.
yeah.
But,
Wait a minute.
but yes, we welcome local nonprofit community organizations to come and table and connect
Right.
with the community and let folks know about what's going on, and get on their mailing list, or go to their event or what have you. I strongly encourage local nonprofits to get in touch with me if you have something that you want to talk about, and come on down to the farmers market, and yes, let's have conversations. Let's connect.
Let's
be
so
a
when you
community.
see people, you can say, hi, how you doing? And it's sort of an interesting, another way of that we work as Bellows Falls is a nice place to be.
Yeah, it's funny because what started our whole conversation a couple weeks ago is you've probably seen the banner, the hashtag I Love Bellows Falls banner. Well, there was some chatter on Facebook, and there was some negative chatter on Facebook about how horrible Bellows Falls is, blah, 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 blah. And anyway, so we got on our soapboxes that Wednesday, and we talked about really the only way you get out of a community, you get out of a community what you put into a community.
Sure.
So if you want to continue to have farmers markets, if you want to do these things that really work to bring the community together, you have to support it. You have to get in there, and we've gone black in the background.
I know.
Is it the
No.
Darth Vader invasion? What's the new
They
movie?
cut us off.
Is it Solo?
No more preaching.
No more preaching. That's right. No more soapbox. Exactly.
No more
That's
you
it.
are cut off.
I
No
am
more
cut off. I'm cut
soapbox
off of
for
my
Marty.
preaching the
Time to step
positivity,
down from the soapbox. I
positivity
guess.
of
Yeah.
community.
And well, I think we are getting, I'm trying to figure out, because I forgot to turn the timer on again, and I think we're at a time where he's giving me the big cut it. So, Janice, thank you for coming in.
Oh, thank you
and
so much for having me.
good luck with the farmer's market. You've done an amazing job, and I'm sure it's going to be another great year. I'll see you there this Friday. Marty?
I won't
good-
be here this Friday because I'm
'Cause
going to
you
be
are
in
leading.
Rotary. I'm not leading anything in
You're
Rotary.
leading Rotary.
Lead Rotary on down to the farmer's market.
She's
Well,
going
then
to the big,
Burlington, so it'll be a
going to
little-
the big
Oh,
city.
no,
The big
no.
city. Yep.
Yep.
Taking a trip to the big city.
All right, and so
All
we're
right.
going to end, and we're closing with a film that Alex took at the Memorial Day ceremony, and we're going to go to clip right now. So thank you, Bellows Falls, and we'll see you next
Thank you.
week. Thank you.
Mozart, opera, why did Mozart consider himself primarily an opera composer? That's a good question. There are many possible answers to that. One is that it gave him a chance to write many, many, many melodies within the course of the same work. He was very melodically driven. There are some composers who are more melodists than others. Mozart was a melodist. Despite the image we have of him just falling out of bed and endlessly making up melodies, as I think I may have said before, that is true, but then he worked on them. He worked very hard on his melodies to make them into the pristine things of beauty that we admire today. So that's one reason. Another reason was he was fascinated by humanity. And what is more the story of humanity artistically than opera? So he actually wrote his first works for the stage. We have to take that a little loosely, when he was 11, because the first work that he actually wrote was a sacred Singspiel, that is, a piece with spoken dialogue, and it was sacred, which would make it more like an oratorio, but it's still considered an opera. By the time he was 20, he had written well over a dozen, and he wrote from the time he was 11 until his death, that's 24 years, he wrote 23 operas. There were some years where he didn't write any, but then there were years when he wrote a number. A lot of the earlier ones were produced in Salzburg, as could be understood. That was his home base. But by the time he was a teenager, they were being, some of them were being produced in places like Milan, which was, of course, one of the places that he went on tour with his father when he was a teenager. And he learned a great deal about Italian operatic composition when he was there. He was like a sponge. He just absorbed all of this material. And then, when he did further tours, he also had some of his operas produced in Munich, and then finally in Vienna, where he settled in 1781 and 1782. Of his first 17 operas, only 4 of them were not produced during his lifetime, which is a really good record when you consider how difficult it was to spread the word on anything without a publisher. I mean, this was before the real age of publication, which kind of began with Beethoven, where it was easier, much easier to disseminate works of music. So that's a good record. And he worked with a number of different librettists. But one thing that is really important to remember about his writing for opera is that he had really firm ideas about the characters in the story and what he wanted from the librettist. So although we think of a couple of his most famous collaborators, namely Lorenzo da Ponte and also Emanuel Schikaneder, who wrote the libretto for The Magic Flute, Mozart was not above coaxing, cajoling, or bullying his librettists into getting what he wanted. So when we talk about psychological insight, and you can't talk about Mozart's great operas without talking about psychological insight, when we talk about that, we can give some of the credit to whoever wrote the original play or story on which the libretto was based, some of the credit to the librettist, but a lot of the credit to Mozart, not just in selecting the words and the portions of text that he wanted or that he wanted changed, but also in what he was able to show about the human condition through the music. And that's what's really, really important, because so much of it, you can close your eyes, you can get a tremendous amount out of a Mozart opera just by listening, even if you don't know the language. And he was wonderful at adapting himself to the language. Of course, he was a native German speaker. and yet his operas in Italian are the operas of an Italian. What I always say is when he was writing in Italian, he was an Italian composer. When he was writing in German, he was a German composer. And if you listen to the difference between Don Giovanni, for instance, and the Magic Flute, in terms of how the melodies are written, you can hear a really big difference in style. And it's not just because the story is different, it's because the language is different. And so he is adapting what he's doing to the language, also to the particular singers he was writing for. Okay? Today, we are covering a 2 3/4 hour opera in an hour and a quarter. The Le Nozze di Figaro was Mozart's 18th opera. It was produced first at the Burgtheater on the 5th of May in 1786. So by this time he was 30. He was married, had a couple of kids. He had been living in Vienna for about 4 years. It was quite successful. And then it went on to Prague, which was a much smaller musical setting than Vienna. But Prague went absolutely wild for The Marriage of Figaro. And Mozart was thrilled. He went there later that year, 1786, as they were producing it, and then it was produced in late December and into January, and he went to a gathering afterwards at which a number of the pieces were excerpted in instrumental form, and he wrote something to the effect of, they're just playing Figaro, they're singing Figaro, they're talking Figaro, there's nothing but Figaro. It's a great moment for me. And when we listen to the tunes in Figaro, there's no reason why that shouldn't be so. The music is just overflowing with great tunes that also at the same time are very fitting to the moment, to the dramatic or comedic moment. And you can tell when you listen to the overture and when you listen to this work where Rossini got a lot of his operatic inspiration. Was Rossini Italian? Sure he was. So he had a great tradition to draw on. But his nickname when he was a teenager was Il Tedeschino, the little German, because he was such an admirer of Mozart and Beethoven. And so he got a lot from this, and it shows up in The Barber of Seville, among other places, which was produced actually 30 years afterwards. Now, a little bit about the history of the text of the opera before we start to listen. This is the second of a set of 3 plays written by the French dramatist Beaumarchais about a set of characters. The first one is The Barber of Seville. The second is The Marriage of Figaro. And the third, nobody ever does, because it was very depressing. And it was something like the Troubled Wife or something like that. In the first one, Figaro is this kind of man about town who becomes the servant or helper to Count Almaviva as he's wooing Rosina and trying to lure her away from her guardian who actually wants to marry her because she's got a lot of money, even though she's about a third his age. That all works out well. In the second play, Figaro has been rewarded by being made the head of the household of all the servants, and he is wishing to get married to the lady's maid, Susanna. The marriage of Almaviva and Rosina has hit some bumps because the Count has done what many noble counts do, in that he's had a roving eye and been able to satisfy that roving eye in a way that hurts his wife, and where she is really sorrowful about that. And the story carries on from there. The big change that was made from the play to the opera libretto was that the play actually had a really hard time being staged because it was so political. Now you have to understand that the play was written in 1784. That's 5 years before the French Revolution, but during a time of great political ferment in France. Near the end of the play, Figaro has a big speech where he decries nobility and the privilege that comes with nobility. Well, of course, that didn't go over very well with the censors. So one of the first things that Lorenzo da Ponte did, and this was his first collaboration with Mozart, by the way, his second being Così fan tutte, and the third one being Don Giovanni. The first thing that he did was he got rid of all the political speech in it. So it became a domestic comedy rather than one with political implications. So that rant about privilege becomes a rant instead in Act 4 about unfaithful wives. So it becomes personal rather than political. The libretto centers on two couples. One very happy, about to get married, the other unhappy. Which reminds me of the opening of the novel Anna Karenina. Every happy family is happy in the same way. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. The play basically is about the Count who has abolished the medieval droit du seigneur, which was the right of the nobleman to take any young bride in his household to bed before her wedding night. He had abolished that when he married Rosina. So he had actually signed off on that, but he's trying to backpedal because he's very attracted to Susanna. She knows that, and she's at the beginning, you see, she's quite nervous about how close to the Count's bedroom their bedroom is going to be once they're married. So the whole play is basically about him wanting her and the other two trying to fool him and teach the Count a lesson. And there's all sorts of craziness that goes on with people hiding in closets and being discovered and jumping out of windows. And it also involves a young man named Cherubino who has a very roving eye and keeps getting caught in compromising positions and infuriates the Count for a number of reasons. Well, he's jealous because he thinks that Cherubino is attached to his wife, but well, maybe. But in any case, that is a trouser role. It's usually sung by a mezzo-soprano or a soprano. And so his problem, that is Cherubino's problem, is that he can't decide on a particular woman. And he just, his head spins when he thinks about them all. And so this is an opera in 4 acts. I'm going to show you 4 different clips, okay? Some are longer than others. The first one, we're starting right at the beginning with the overture and going through the first scene with Figaro and Susanna planning making the final plans for their wedding. He's measuring out the room, and she's coming in with her new headgear to say, "Isn't this wonderful?" And then they're talking about different things and having a duet. And Figaro finds out about the Count's designs on Susanna, so he vows to stop him. By the way, another thing that this opera is about is men's bumbling attempts at sort of butting heads and establishing territory, and women's far more subtle ways of getting things done. Because the men's plans basically fall apart in a lot of ways, whereas the women's plans manage to move along okay. So anyway, that's the first 15 minutes, and this is a performance from Paris in 1993. It's a filmed performance. But I think what happens in it, when you see the overture, you'll notice that the orchestra's on the stage. And then it stops, and then it goes. You hear applause. So I think what happened was they filmed some things like the overture with them on the stage, and then they went to performance. So you can see sets changing, and you can hear applause and things like that, and it's clearly on a stage. And it stars the wonderful Bryn Terfel, the Welsh bass baritone, as Figaro, Alison Hagley as Susanna, Rodney Gilfrey as the Count, Hilevi Martin-Pelto, I don't know who she is, but she's a great Rosina. Pamela Helen Stephen plays Cherubino as the Monteverdi Choir, the English Baroque soloists. So you'll see in the overture historical instruments. So the flutes are without keys, they're with holes, and the clarinets are old and light wood, and the marvelous John Eliot Gardner conducting. So here's the overture and the first part of Marriage of Figaro. And by the way, you're going to be really angry with me at the end because I have to keep stopping it, okay? And I had to make choices. Sorry. Okay, starts right off. notice how many women there are in the orchestra? It's pretty cool.
Perché tanto ti spiace la più comoda stanza del palazzo? Grazie, non tanti elogi. Guarda un poco se potrei assistarmi in altro luogo. Sia caso, non ti chiama. Andare sì
Yeah, well, it's amazing. There's something in the water that creates baritones and basses. Most of the operatic ones you see are about 6'3" at least. It's just the one exception to that I'm aware of who's singing now is Simon Keenlyside.
Yes.
And he's not tall. But the Count is just as tall as he. James Morris, who sang bass for years at the Met, about 6'3". All these guys, they're all big. I think they need more space for those deep notes.
And how starkly simple the set is compared to the elaborate sets we're used to seeing.
Yes, which is, this is a much more European approach. You'll notice the other thing about Mozart is he loves human interaction. He loved playing cards, he loved playing billiards, going out visiting, sitting in taverns with his friends. And so you can see the conversations and the way he sets up duets and trios and quartets to get things, the way he repeats certain words so he gets wonderful musical effects, but at the same time he also furthers his storytelling and our insights into the characters through the music and the way he sets things up. So I'm sure that he was saying things to Da Ponte such as, I need a quartet here. I need a duet here. That's what operatic composers have been doing since the mid-18th century, is saying to their librettists, this is what I need here. So personally, when David Budbill was turning parts of Judavine into a fleeting animal, I said, we've got these new characters, I want a quartet here. I want a quartet there. I want a love duet here. And it gave him the chance to do that. It was one of the things he liked about it, was he was always wanting to improvise. He was a jazz guy. And so it gave him a chance to not just add characters, but to give them dimension through having these things. And I've got to confess, my inspiration was Don Giovanni, in terms of having four people saying four different things at the same time and having it work together musically. And what you do is you make sure that they're repeating their lines enough time that they get to sing it once where you can hear that line carefully or clearly, and then going on, you don't need to hear it so much, you just see how it's layered and how they all work together. So, anyway.
Thank you.
Something you didn't know.
No.
All right, we are now skipping ahead to about, well, into the end of the first act, where we have Cherubino who comes in and saying, oh, so many young women, I just can't decide. Or it should be, so many young women, I just can't decide. And unfortunately, the Count wants to punish him because he finds him hanging around with Barbarina, who is the daughter of the gardener, and he thinks that he's chasing after the skirt of his own wife, the Countess, and things like that. But he can't catch him. And so what happens is there's all this stuff where they're hiding from each other under clothing and behind chairs, and they get discovered and undiscovered and all sorts of crazy things. So finally, the Count just says, okay, I forgive you, and so I'm actually going to promote you. I'm sending you off to the army. And so where we come in, Figaro, who's going to have a good time with Cherubino, says, okay, no more gallivanting around for you. Now it's time to march. So we pick this up around, whoops. Whoop. Okay. So the townspeople have come to, this is Figaro's idea, to say, oh, we're going to have a wedding, isn't it great, Count, thank you so much. And so, of course, that puts him on the spot because, you know, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, we are going to actually have the wedding. Because there is a subplot in which Don Bartolo, who has never forgiven Figaro from helping the Count to swipe Rosina to marry her, is plotting with Marcellina, who had loaned Figaro some money, and he promised to marry her if he couldn't pay back the money. So now the Count has heard of this and says, okay, I will use this to my advantage. So Figaro says, I'll outsmart him. He brings in all the townspeople to say, hey, we're going to have a wedding, isn't that wonderful? So anyway, that's where we are. Oh, this is nothing. This is nothing.
That's true.
Okay, so now we go to the next act. And we come in on the Countess, who is sick at heart because of her husband's philandering. And she sings about how sad she is and how difficult her life is because of what he's doing to her. So it follows immediately. I'm just going to skip ahead a little so that we get to actual action here. Sorry. That, of course, is Susanna's wedding veil, and the Countess is putting it on as a way of remembering.